Hello everyone, and welcome back for the next chapter of The Legend of Drizzt, which is actually going to be 2 chapters tonight, and will lead us into part 3 of the book. So this is going to be the ending of part 2, these next 2 chapters, which is very exciting. We're moving along with this one at a pretty good clip. I'm very excited about that. So we are going to go ahead and hop into that. And basically what happened in the last chapter is there was a raid on another house by a rival house, House Drizzt, that was failed because they failed to eliminate everyone in the other house. So accusations were able to be leveled against them, and they were completely destroyed as a house through the summoning of demons from the lower planes, which was very upsetting to Drizzt to witness. And meanwhile, at the Magic Academy in Sorcerre, Alton Devere has been found out not to have been the Faceless One by Matron Zaknafein Hanette of Masage's family, because the original Faceless One was his brother. So, he's been found out, the ruse has been found out, but he's been adopted into the family as an ally, so they're kind of hedging their bets there with that one. So that's where we're at, and that's where we'll keep going. All right, here we go. Chapter 10: Stain of Blood. Zaknafein is out of the house, Malice asked. I sent him and Risen to the academy to deliver a message to Vierna, Briza explained. He shan't return for many hours, not before the light of Narbondel begins its descent. This is good, said Malice. You both understand your duties in this farce. Briza and Maya nodded. I have never heard of such a deception, Maya remarked. Is it necessary? It was planned for another of the house, Briza answered, looking to Matron Malice for confirmation. Nearly 4 centuries ago. Yes, agreed Malice. The same was to be done to Zaknafein, but the unexpected death of Matron Vartha, my mother, disrupted the plans. That was when you became the Matron Mother, Maya said. Yes, replied Malice, though I had not yet passed my first century of life and was still training in Aractinolith. It was not a pleasant time in the history of House Do'Urden. But we survived, said Briza. With the death of Matron Vartha, Nalfine and I became nobles of the house. The test on Zaknafein was never attempted, Maya reasoned. Too many other duties preceded it, Malice answered. We will try it on Drizzt, though, said Maya. The punishment of House Drizzt convinced me that this action had to be taken, said Malice. Yes, Briza agreed. Did you notice Drizzt's expression throughout the execution? I did, answered Maya. He was revolted. Unfitting for a drow warrior, said Malice. And so this duty is upon us. Drizzt will leave for the academy in a short time. We must stain his hands with drow blood and steal his innocence. It seems a lot of trouble for a male child, Briza grumbled. If Drizzt cannot adhere to our ways, then why do we not simply give him to Lolth? I will bear no more children, Malice growled in response. Every member of this family is important if we are to gain prominence in the city. Secretly, Malice hoped for another gain in converting Drizzt to the evil ways of the drow. She hated Zaknafein as much as she desired him, and turning Drizzt into a drow warrior, a true heartless drow warrior, would distress the weapons master greatly. On with it, then, Malice proclaimed. She clapped her hands, and a large chest walked in, supported by 8 animated spider legs. Behind it came a nervous goblin slave. Come, Byokyuk, Malice said in a comforting tone. Anxious to please, the slave bounded up before Malice's throne and held perfectly still as the Matron Mother went through the incantation of a long and complicated spell. Briza and Maya watched in admiration at their mother's skills. The little goblin's features bulged and twisted, and its skin darkened. A few minutes later, the slave had assumed the appearance of a male drow. Byokyuk looked at its features happily, not understanding that the transformation was merely a prelude to death. You are a drow soldier now, Maya said to it. and my champion. You must kill only a single inferior fighter to take your place as a free commoner of House Do'Urden." After 10 years as an indentured servant to the wicked Dark Elves, the goblin was more than eager. Malice rose and started out of the anteroom. "Come," she ordered, and her 2 daughters, the goblin and the animated chest, fell in line behind her. They came upon Drizzt in the practice room, polishing the razor edge of the scimitars. He leaped straight up to silent attention at the sight of the unexpected visitors. "Greetings, my son," Malice said, in a tone more motherly than Drizzt had ever heard. "We have a test for you this day, a simple task necessary for your acceptance into Melee Magthir." Maya moved before her brother. "I am the youngest, beside yourself," she declared. "Thus I am granted the rights of challenge, which I now execute." Drizzt stood confused. He had never heard of such a thing. Maya called the chest to her side and reverently opened the cover. "You have your weapons and your Piwafwi," she explained. "Now it is time for you to don the complete outfit of a noble of House Do'Urden." From the chest she pulled out a pair of high black boots and handed them to Drizzt. Drizzt eagerly slipped out of his normal boots and put on the new ones. They were incredibly soft, and they magically shifted and adjusted to a perfect fit on his feet. Drizzt knew the magic within them. They would allow him to move in absolute silence. Before he had even finished admiring them, though, Maya gave him the next gift, even more magnificent. Drizzt dropped his Piwafwi to the floor as he took a set of silvery chainmail. In all the realms, there was no armor as supple and finely crafted as drow chainmail. It weighed no more than a heavy shirt and would bend as easily as silken cloth. It could deflect the tip of a spear as surely as dwarven-crafted plate mail. "You fight with 2 weapons," Maya said, "and therefore need no shields. But put your scimitars in this. It is more fitting to a drow noble." She handed Drizzt a black leather belt, its clasp a huge emerald, and its 2 scabbards richly decorated in jewels and gemstones. "Prepare yourself," Malice said to Drizzt. "The gifts must be earned." As Drizzt started to don the outfit, Malice moved beside the altered goblin, which stood nervously to the growing realization that its fight would be no simple task. "When you kill him, the items will be yours," Malice promised. The goblin's smile returned tenfold. It could not comprehend that it had no chance against Drizzt. When Drizzt again fastened his Piwafwi around his neck, Maya introduced the phony drow soldier. "This is Byuk-Yuk," she said. "My champion. You must defeat him to earn the gifts, and your proper place in the family." Never doubting his abilities and thinking the contest to be a simple sparring match, Drizzt readily agreed. "Let it begin then," he said, drawing his scimitars from their lavish sheaths. Malice gave Byuk-Yuk a comforting nod, and the goblin took up the sword and shield that Maya had provided and moved right in at Drizzt. Drizzt began slowly, trying to take a measure of his opponent before attempting any daring offensive strikes. In only a moment, though, Drizzt realized how badly Byuk-Yuk handled the sword and shield. Not knowing the truth of the creature's identity, Drizzt could hardly believe that a drow would show such ineptitude with weapons. He wondered if Byuk-Yuk was baiting him, and with that thought continued his cautious approach. After a few more moments of Byuk-Yuk's wild and off-balance swings, however, Drizzt felt compelled to take the initiative. He slapped one scimitar against Byuk-Yuk's shield. The goblin drow responded with a lumbering thrust, and Drizzt slapped its sword from its hand with his free blade and executed a simple twist that brought the scimitar's tip to a halt against the hollow of Byuk-Yuk's chest. "Too easy," Drizzt muttered under his breath. But the true test had only begun. On cue, Briza cast a mind-numbing spell on the goblin, freezing it in its helpless position. Still aware of its predicament, Byuk-Yuk tried to dive away, but Briza's spell held it still. "Finish the strike," Malice said to Drizzt. Drizzt looked at his scimitar, then to Malice, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Maya's champion must be killed," Briza snarled. "I cannot," Drizzt began. "Kill!" Malice roared, and this time the word carried the weight of a magical command. "Thrust!" Briza likewise commanded. Drizzt felt their words compelling his hand to action. Though thoroughly disgusted with the thought of murdering a helpless foe, he concentrated with all of his mental strength to resist. While he managed to deny the commands for a few seconds, Drizzt found that he could not pull the weapon away. "Kill!" Malice screamed. "Strike!" yelled Briza. It went on for several more agonizing seconds. Sweat beaded on Drizzt's brow. Then the young drow's willpower broke. His scimitar slipped quickly between Byuk-Yuk's ribs and found the unfortunate creature's heart. Briza released Byuk-Yuk from her holding spell then, to let Drizzt see the agony on the phony drow's face, and hear the gurgles as the dying Byuk-Yuk slipped to the floor. Drizzt could not find his breath as he stared at the blood-stained weapon. It was Maya's turn to act. She clipped Drizzt on the shoulder with her mace, knocking him to the floor. "You killed my champion," she growled. "Now you must fight me." Drizzt rolled back to his feet, away from the enraged female. He had no intention of fighting, but before he could even drop his weapons, Malice read his thoughts and warned, "If you do not fight, Maya will kill you." "This is not the way," Drizzt protested, but his words were lost in the ring of adamantine as he parried a heavy blow with one scimitar. He was now into it, whether he liked it or not. Maya was a skilled fighter. All females spent many hours training with their weapons, and she was stronger than Drizzt. But Drizzt was Zak's son, the prime student, and when he admitted to himself that he had no way out of this predicament, he came in at Maya's mace and shield with every cunning maneuver he had been taught. Scimitars weaved and dipped in a dance that awed Briza and Maya. Malice hardly noticed, caught in the midst of yet another mighty spell. Malice never doubted that Drizzt could defeat his sister, and she had incorporated her expectations into the plan. Drizzt's moves were all defensive as he continued to hope for some semblance of sanity to come over his mother, and that this whole thing would be stopped. He wanted to back Maya up, cause her to stumble, and end the fight by putting her in a helpless position. Drizzt had to believe that Briza and Malice would not compel him to kill Maya as he had killed Byuk-Yuk. Finally, Maya did slip. She threw her shield out to deflect an arcing scimitar, but became overbalanced in the block, and her arm went wide. Drizzt's other blade knifed in, only to nick at Maya's breast and force her back. Malice's spell caught the weapon in mid-thrust. The blood-stained adamantine blade writhed to life, and Drizzt found himself holding the tail of a serpent, a fanged viper that turned back against him. The enchanted snake spat its venom in Drizzt's eyes, blinding him. Then he felt the pain of Briza's whip. All 6 snakeheads of the awful weapon bit into Drizzt's back, tearing through his new armor and jolting him in excruciating pain. He crumbled down into a curled position, helpless as Briza snapped the whip in again and again. "Never strike at a drow female!" she screamed as she beat Drizzt into unconsciousness. An hour later, Drizzt opened his eyes. He was in his bed, Matron Malice standing over him. The High Priestess had tended to his wounds, but the sting remained, a vivid reminder of the lesson. But it was not nearly as vivid as the blood that still stained Drizzt's scimitar. "The armor will be replaced," Malice said to him. "You are a drow warrior now. You have earned it." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Drizzt to his pain and his fallen innocence. "Do not send him," Zak argued as emphatically as he dared. He stared up at Matron Malice, the smug queen on her high throne of stone and black velvet. As always, Briza and Maya stood obediently by her sides. "He is a drow fighter," Malice replied, her tone still controlled. "He must go to the academy. It is our way." Zak looked around helplessly. He hated this place, the chapel anteroom, with its sculptures of the Spider Queen leering down at him from every angle, and with Malice sitting, towering above him from her seat of power. Zak shook the images away and regained his courage, reminding himself that this time he had something worth arguing about. "Do not send him!" he growled. "They will ruin him!" Matron Malice's hands clenched down on the rock arms of her great chair. "Already Drizzt is more skilled than half of those in the academy," Zak continued quickly before the matron's anger burst forth. "Allow me 2 more years, and I will make him the finest swordsman in all of Menzoberranzan." Malice eased back on her seat. From what she had seen of her son's progress, she could not deny the possibilities of Zak's claims. "He goes," she said calmly. "There is more to the making of a drow warrior than skill with weapons. Drizzt has other lessons he must learn." "Lessons of treachery!" Zak spat, too angry to care about the consequences. Drizzt had told him what Malice and her evil daughters had done that day, and Zak was wise enough to understand their actions. Their lesson had nearly broken the boy, and had perhaps forever stolen from Drizzt the ideals he held so dear. Drizzt would find his morals and principles harder to cling to now that the pedestal of purity had been knocked out from under him. "Watch your tongue, Zaknafein," Matron Malice warned. "I fight with passion," the weapons master snapped. "That is why I win. Your son, too, fights with passion. Do not let the conforming ways of the Academy take that from him." "Leave us," Malice instructed her daughters. Maya bowed and rushed out through the door. Briza followed more slowly, pausing to cast a suspicious eye upon Zak. Zak didn't return the glare, but he entertained a fantasy concerning his sword and Briza's smug smile. "Zaknafein," Malice began, again coming forward in her chair. "I have tolerated your blasphemous beliefs through these many years because of your skill with weapons. You have taught my soldiers well, and your love of killing drow, particularly clerics of the Spider Queen, has aided the ascent of House Do'Urden. I am not, and have not been, ungrateful. But I warn you now, one final time, that Drizzt is my son, not his sire's. He will go to the Academy, and learn what he must to take his place as a prince of House Do'Urden. If you interfere with what must be, Zaknafein, I will no longer turn my eyes from your actions. Your heart will be given to Lolth." Zak stamped his heels on the floor and snapped a short bow of his head, then spun about and departed, trying to find some option in this dark and hopeless picture. As he made his way through the main corridor, he again heard in his mind the screams of the dying children of House DeVere. Children who never got the chance to witness the evils of the Drow Academy. Perhaps they were better off dead. Chapter 11. Grim Preference. Zak slid one of his swords from its scabbard and admired the weapon's wondrous detail. This sword, as with most of the Drow weapons, had been forged by the Grey Dwarves, then traded to Menzoberranzan. The Duergar workmanship was exquisite, but it was the work done on the weapon after the Dark Elves had acquired it that made it so very special. None of the races of the Surface or Underdark could outdo the Dark Elves in the art of enchanting weapons. Imbued with the strange emanations of the Underdark, the magical power unique to the lightless world and blessed by the unholy clerics of Lolth, no blade ever sat in a wielder's hand more ready to kill. Other races, mostly dwarves and surface elves, also took pride in their crafted weapons. Fine swords and mighty hammers hung over mantles as showpieces, always with a bard nearby to spout the accompanying legend that most often began, "In the days of yore." Drow weapons were different, never showpieces. They were locked in the necessities of the present, never in reminiscences, and their purpose remained unchanged for as long as they held an edge fine enough for battle, fine enough to kill. Zak brought the blade up before his eyes. In his hands, the sword had become more than an instrument of battle. It was an extension of his rage, his answer to an existence he could not accept. It was his answer, too, perhaps, to another problem that seemed to have no resolution. They walked into the training hall, where Drizzt was hard at work, spinning attack routines against a practice dummy. Zak paused to watch the young drow practice, wondering if Drizzt would ever again consider the dance of weapons a form of play. How the scimitars flowed in Drizzt's hands. Interweaving with uncanny precision, each blade seemed to anticipate the other's moves and whirred about in perfect complement. This young drow might soon be an unrivaled fighter, a master beyond Zaknafein himself. "Can you survive?" Zak whispered. "Have you the heart of a drow warrior?" Zak hoped the answer would be an emphatic no, but either way, Drizzt was surely doomed. Zak looked down at his sword again, and knew what he must do. He slid its sister blade from its sheath, and started a determined walk toward Drizzt. Drizzt saw him coming and turned at the ready. A final fight before I leave for the academy. He laughed. Zak paused to take note of Drizzt's smile. A facade? Or had the young drow really forgiven himself for his actions against Maya's champion? It did not matter, Zak reminded himself. Even if Drizzt had recovered from his mother's torments, the academy would destroy him. The weapons master said nothing. He just came on in a flurry of cuts and stabs that put Drizzt immediately on the defensive. Drizzt took it in stride, not realizing that this final encounter with his mentor was much more than their customary sparring. I will remember everything you taught me, Drizzt promised, dodging a cut and launching a fierce counter of his own. I will carve my name in the halls of Melee Magthyr and make you proud. The scowl on Zak's face surprised Drizzt, and the young drow grew even more confused when the weapons master's next attack sent a sword knifing straight at his heart. Drizzt leaped aside, slapping at the blade in sheer desperation, and narrowly avoided impalement. Are you so very sure of yourself? Zak growled, stubbornly pursuing Drizzt. Drizzt set himself as their blades met in ringing fury. I am a fighter, he declared. A drow warrior. You are a dancer, Zak shot back in a derisive tone. He slammed his sword onto Drizzt's blocking scimitar so savagely that the young drow's arm tingled. An imposter, Zak cried. A pretender to a title you cannot begin to understand. Drizzt went on the offensive. Fires burned in his lavender eyes, and new strength guided his scimitar's sure cuts. But Zak was relentless. He fended the attacks and continued his lesson. Do you know the emotions of murder? He spat. Have you reconciled yourself to the act you committed? Drizzt's only answers were a frustrated growl and a renewed attack. Ah, the pleasure of plunging your sword into the bosom of a high priestess, Zak taunted. To see the light of warmth leave her body, while her lips utter silent curses in your face. Or have you ever heard the screams of dying children? Drizzt let up his attack, but Zak would not allow a break. The weapons master came back on the offensive, each thrust aimed for a vital area. How loud those screams, Zak continued. They echo over the centuries in your mind. They chase you down the paths of your entire life. Zak halted the action so that Drizzt might weigh his every word. You have never heard them, have you, dancer? The weapons master stretched his arms out wide, an invitation. Come, then, and claim your second kill, he said, tapping his stomach. In the belly, where the pain is greatest, so that my screams may echo in your mind. Prove to me that you are the drow warrior you claim to be. The tips of Drizzt's scimitars slowly made their way to the stone floor. He wore no smile now. You hesitate, Zak laughed at him. This is your chance to make your name. A single thrust, and you will send a reputation into the academy before you. Other students, even masters, will whisper your name as you pass. Drizzt, a word, and they will say, the boy who slew the most honored weapons master in all of Menzoberranzan. Is this not what you desire? Damn you, Drizzt spat back, but still he made no move to attack. Drow warrior, Zak chided him. Do not be so quick to claim a title you cannot begin to understand. Drizzt came on then, in a fury he had never before known. His purpose was not to kill, but to defeat his teacher, to steal the taunts from Zak's mouth with a fighting display too impressive to be derided. Drizzt was brilliant. He followed every move with 3 others, and worked Zak low and high, inside and out wide. Zak found his heels under him more often than on the balls of his feet. Too involved was he in staying away from his students' relentless thrusts to even think of taking the offensive. He allowed Drizzt to continue the initiative for many minutes, dreading its conclusion, the outcome he had already decided to be the most preferable. Zak then found that he could stand the delay no longer. He sent one sword out in a lazy thrust, and Drizzt promptly slapped the weapon out of his hand. Even as the young drow came on in anticipation of victory, Zak slipped his empty hand into a pouch and grabbed a magical little ceramic ball, one of those that so often had aided him in battle. Not this time, Zaknafein! Drizzt proclaimed, keeping his attacks under control, remembering well the many occasions that Zak reversed feigned disadvantage into clear advantage. Zak fingered the ball, unable to come to terms with what he must do. Drizzt walked him through an attack sequence, then another, measuring the advantage he had gained in stealing a weapon. Confident of his position, Drizzt came in low and hard with a single thrust. Though Zak was distracted at the time, he still managed to block the attack with his remaining sword. Drizzt's other scimitar slashed down on top of the sword, pinning its tip to the floor. In the same lightning movement, Drizzt slipped his first blade free of Zak's parry and brought it up and around, stopping the thrust barely an inch from Zak's throat. "I have you!" the young drow cried. Zak's answer came in an explosion of light beyond anything Drizzt had ever imagined. Zak had prudently closed his eyes, but Drizzt, surprised, could not accept the sudden change. His head burned in agony, and he reeled backward, trying to get away from the light, away from the weapons master. Keeping his eyes tightly shut, Zak had already divorced himself from the need of vision. He let his keen ears guide him now, and Drizzt, shuffling and stumbling, was an easy target to discern. In a single motion, the whip came off Zak's belt, and he lashed out, catching Drizzt around the ankles and dropping him to the floor. Methodically, the weapons master came on, dreading every step, but knowing his chosen course of action to be correct. Drizzt realized that he was being stalked, but he could not understand the motive. The light had stunned him, but he was more surprised by Zak's continuation of the battle. Drizzt set himself, unable to escape the trap, and tried to think his way around his loss of sight. He had to feel the flow of battle, to hear the sounds of his attacker, and anticipate each coming strike. He brought his scimitars up just in time to block a sword chop that would have split his skull. Zak hadn't expected the parry. He recoiled and came in from a different angle. Again, he was foiled. Now more curious than wanting to kill Drizzt, the weapons master went through a series of attacks, sending his sword into motions that would have sliced through the defenses of many who could see him. Blinded, Drizzt fought him off, putting a scimitar in line with each new thrust. "Treachery!" Drizzt yelled, painful residual explosions from the bright light still bursting inside his head. He blocked another attack, and tried to regain his footing, realizing that he had little chance of continuing to fend off the weapons master from a prone position. The pain of the stinging light was too great, though, and Drizzt, barely holding the edge of consciousness, stumbled back to the stone, losing one scimitar in the process. He spun over wildly, knowing that Zak was close. The other scimitar was knocked from his hand. "Treachery," Drizzt growled again. "Do you so hate to lose?" "Do you not understand?" Zak yelled back at him. "To lose is to die! You may win 1,000 fights, but you can only lose one!" He put his sword in line with Drizzt's throat. It would be a single, clean blow. He knew that he should do it, mercifully, before the masters of the academy got hold of his charge. Zak sent his sword spinning across the room, and he reached out with his empty hands, grabbed Drizzt by the front of his shirt, and hoisted him to his feet. They stood face to face, neither seeing the other very well in the blinding glare, and neither able to break the tense silence. After a long and breathless moment, the glimmer of the enchanted pebble faded, and the room became more comfortable. Truly, the two dark elves looked upon each other in a different light. "A trick of Lolth's clerics," Zak explained. "Always they keep such a spell of light at the ready." A strained smile crossed his face as he tried to ease Drizzt's anger. "Though I dare say that I have turned such light against clerics, even high priestesses, more than a few times." "Treachery," Drizzt spat a third time. "It is our way," Zak replied. "You will learn." "It is your way," snarled Drizzt. "You grin when you speak of murdering clerics of the Spider Queen. Do you so enjoy killing? Killing drow?" Zak could not find an answer to the accusing question. Drizzt's words hurt him profoundly because they rang of truth, and because Zak had come to view his penchant for killing clerics of Lolth as a cowardly response to his own unanswerable frustrations. "You would have killed me," Drizzt said bluntly. "But I did not," Zak retorted. "And now you live to go to the academy, to take a dagger in the back because you are blind to the realities of our world, because you refuse to acknowledge what your people are. Or you will become one of them," Zack growled. "Either way, the Drizzt I have known will surely die." Drizzt's face twisted, and he couldn't even find the words to dispute the possibilities Zack was spitting at him. He felt the blood drain from his face, though his heart raged. He walked away, letting his glare linger on Zack for many steps. "Go then, Drizzt, Zack cried after him. "Go to the academy and bask in the glory of your prowess. Remember, though, the consequences of such skills. There are always consequences." Zack retreated to the security of his private chamber. The door to the room closed behind the weapons master, with a sound of finality that had spun Zack back to face its empty stone. "Go then, Drizzt, he whispered in quiet lament. "Go to the academy and learn who you really are." Dinan came for his brother early the next morning. Drizzt slowly left the training room, looking back over his shoulder every few steps to see if Zack would come out and attack him again, or bid him farewell. He knew in his heart that Zack would not. Drizzt had thought them friends, had believed that the bond he and Zaknafein had sown went far beyond the simple lessons in swordplay. The young drow had no answers to the many questions spinning in his mind, and the person who had been his teacher for the last 5 years had nothing left to offer him. "The heat grows in Narbondel," Dinan remarked when they stepped out onto the balcony. "We must not be late for your first day at the academy." Drizzt looked out into the myriad colors and shapes that composed Menzoberranzan. "What is this place?" he whispered, realizing how little he knew of his homeland beyond the walls of his own house. Zack's words, Zack's rage, pressed in on Drizzt as he stood there, reminding him of the ignorance and hinting at a dark path ahead. "This is the world," Dinan replied, though Drizzt's question had been rhetorical. "Do not worry, second boy," he laughed, moving up onto the railing. "You will learn of Menzoberranzan in the academy. You will learn who you are and who your people are." The declaration unsettled Drizzt. Perhaps, remembering his last bitter encounter with the drow he had most trusted, that knowledge was exactly what he was afraid of. He shrugged in resignation, and followed Dinan over the balcony in a magical descent to the compound floor, the first steps down that dark path. Another set of eyes watched intently as Dinan and Drizzt started out from House Do'Urden. Alton Devere sat quietly against the side of a gigantic mushroom, as he had every day for the last 10 days, staring at the Do'Urden complex. Daermon Ashes Bernon, 9th house of Menzoberranzan, the house that had murdered his matron, his sisters and brothers, and all there ever was of House Devere, except for Alton. Alton thought back to the days of House Devere, when Matron Ginefey had gathered the family members together so they might discuss their aspirations. Alton, just a student when House Devere fell, now had a greater insight to those times. 20 years had brought a wealth of experience. Ginefey had been the youngest matron among the ruling families, and her potential had seemed unlimited. Then she had aided a gnomish patrol, had used her Lolth-given powers to hinder the drow elves that ambushed the little people in the caverns outside Menzoberranzan. All because Ginefey desired the death of a single member of that attacking drow party, a wizard son of the city's 3rd house, the house labeled as House Devere's next victim. The Spider Queen took exception to Ginefey's choice of weapons. Deep gnomes were the Dark Elves' worst enemy in the whole of the Underdark. With Ginefey fallen out of Lolth's favor, House Devere had been doomed. Alton had spent 20 years trying to learn of his enemies, trying to discover which drow family had taken advantage of his mother's mistake and had slaughtered his kin. 20 long years, and his adopted matron, Sinefey Hanet, had ended his quest as abruptly as it had begun. Now, as Alton sat watching the guilty house, he knew only one thing for certain. 20 years had done nothing to diminish his rage. And there we have it. That's the end of today's chapters and of part 2 of the book. So, we'll be moving into part 3 with Drizzt start at the academy tomorrow. Until then, I hope everybody has a good evening and that you're staying safe and staying healthy. Good night, everyone, and I will see you then.